Billionaire Vincent Carrington believed his niece was thriving at an elite Connecticut boarding school. For 15 years, he had faithfully deposited $50,000 annually into an educational account to ensure his orphan niece Elena received the education and opportunities his late sister Victoria would have wanted for her. This account was managed by his late sister's trusted sister-in-law, Patricia Hartwell. But when a young woman in a maid's uniform serving him coffee in his own Boston mansion whispered her name, "Elena, sir," and he realized she was his niece, Vincent asked one question that would shatter 15 years of carefully constructed lies. "Elena, I've been sending money for your education for 15 years. Where did it go?" If you've ever wondered how easily family can betray trust, how greed can corrupt even the bonds of blood, this story will leave you stunned. This is about stolen futures, calculated manipulation, and one man's desperate attempt to reclaim what was stolen from the niece he never truly knew. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, Nal's Haven. Hit that notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this reveal how vulnerable the innocent can be when those meant to protect them choose greed instead. And your support helps us keep exposing the truth. Now, let's uncover how 15 years of deception finally came to light. Vincent Carrington stood in the marble foyer of his Boston mansion, his thumb scrolling through quarterly financial reports on his tablet. At 55, he'd built Carrington Technologies into a $4.2 billion empire, transforming cloud computing security in ways that had made him a fixture on Forbes lists and at Davos panels. The mansion, with its sweeping views of Boston Common, was merely one symbol of his success. But lately, something gnawed at him, a persistent unease he couldn't name, like a frequency only he could hear. "Mr. Carrington, your coffee," a soft voice said. He glanced up briefly at the young woman in the plain gray uniform. She was thin, almost frail, with dark hair pulled severely back and eyes that remained downcast. She set the cup on the side table with practiced care and turned to leave. "Wait," Vincent said, something catching in his chest. An odd familiarity in her profile, perhaps, or the way she moved. "What's your name?" "Elena, sir." The name hit him like a physical blow. His tablet slipped from his fingers and shattered against the Italian marble floor, but he barely heard it. "Elena." His voice emerged strangled. "Elena Rodriguez?" The girl froze mid-step. Slowly, she turned back, her eyes wide with confusion and something that looked like fear. "How do you know my mother's maiden name?" Vincent's world tilted dangerously. 18 years old. Those eyes, Victoria's eyes. That delicate bone structure. His sister's face staring back at him through time. "Because your mother was my sister," he whispered. The silence that followed felt crushing. Elena's face drained of all color. Her hands began to tremble. "That's impossible," she said, her voice barely audible. No. Aunt Patricia said you wanted nothing to do with me. She said you blamed me for my mother's death, that you refused to help us." Each word landed like a knife. Vincent's hands clenched into fists at his sides. 15 years flashed through his mind, the monthly deposits, the quarterly phone calls, Patricia's reassuring voice. "She's thriving, Vincent. Top of her class. You've given her such opportunities." "Elena," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I've been sending money for your education for 15 years. $50,000 every year. Private school, tutors, everything you needed." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "What? No. That's impossible. I went to public school in Hartford until I was 16. Then I dropped out to work because Aunt Patricia said there was no money. She said you'd cut us off completely years ago." The foyer spun. Vincent gripped the console table for balance. "Where is Patricia now?" "Florida. She moved 2 years ago when I turned 16. Said I was old enough to take care of myself." Elena's voice cracked. "I've been living in boarding houses, taking whatever work I could find. Mrs. Morrison hired me last month. I had no idea you were. I never knew." Vincent pulled out his phone with shaking hands. His attorney answered on the first ring. "Ben," Vincent said, his voice hollow with dawning horror. "I need a forensic audit. Immediately. Patricia Hartwell. Every account, every transaction for the last 15 years. He ended the call and looked at Elena. Truly looked at his niece for the first time in 15 years. Malnourished. exhausted, a shadow wearing his sister's face. And he understood with crushing, devastating clarity. He hadn't just failed Victoria when she died. He'd been failing her daughter every single day since. 3 weeks later, Vincent would receive the forensic audit results that confirmed his worst fears. Patricia Hartwell had stolen nearly $900,000 over 15 years, living in luxury while Elena survived in poverty. But standing in his marble foyer that October afternoon, watching his niece tremble in a maid's uniform, Vincent didn't need an audit to know the truth. He had failed her catastrophically. The question wasn't whether he bore responsibility. He did. The question was whether anything he could do now would matter to a girl who'd spent 15 years believing she was abandoned, unwanted, blamed for her mother's death. As Elena stood there silently, unable to meet his eyes, Vincent's mind pulled him backward through 15 years of monthly payments, quarterly phone calls with Patricia, and birthday cards he thought had reached his niece. To understand how this happened, how good intentions became complicity in calculated abuse, we need to return to where this nightmare truly began. Back to the day Victoria Carrington died, leaving behind a 3-year-old orphan and a brother too consumed by grief, guilt, and ambition to do anything but write checks and trust the wrong person. Back to the moment when Vincent chose the easy path over the right one. Back to 15 years ago. The memory hit him with brutal force. 15 years ago, standing at Victoria's graveside on a gray March morning. His younger sister, 41 years old, dead from a cerebral aneurysm that struck without warning. One moment she'd been making breakfast for 3-year-old Elena. The next, she'd collapsed on the kitchen floor. Vincent had been in Silicon Valley closing a merger when he got the call. He'd been too busy building his empire to visit Victoria in months. Too consumed with board meetings and product launches to notice she'd stopped calling as often. Too focused on his own ambition to be present for the sister who'd always looked up to him. The guilt had been suffocating. Elena's father had abandoned them a year before Victoria's death, disappeared without a trace, leaving mother and daughter struggling alone. And Vincent, with all his resources, had been absent. Again. At the funeral, he'd stood apart from the mourners, drowning in grief so profound he could barely breathe. How could he possibly raise a 3-year-old? His own marriage had ended years earlier, leaving him alone in a sprawling house he barely inhabited. He worked 80-hour weeks. He traveled constantly. He didn't know the first thing about caring for a traumatized toddler. That's when Patricia Hartwell appeared. Victoria's sister-in-law from her late husband's side, a woman Vincent had met perhaps twice before. She'd approached him after the service, her face full of compassion, her words carefully chosen. "I know we've never been close, Vincent," she'd said softly. "But Victoria was family to me. And Elena is just a baby who's lost everything. You're drowning in grief and building something important. Let me help. Let me raise her with my family in Connecticut. My boys are teenagers. They could be like brothers to her. She'd have stability. A home. A mother figure." It had seemed like salvation. Like an answer to prayers Vincent didn't know how to pray. Within a week, his attorneys had established the educational account. $50,000 annually, transferred without fail. Private school tuition, activities, tutors, everything a child could need. Patricia would manage the funds. Vincent would provide financially while she provided what he couldn't, presence, care, the daily love a child deserved. "I'll send updates," Patricia had promised. "Photos, report cards. You'll know she's safe and thriving." And she had. Every quarter, like clockwork, Patricia would call. Her voice was always bright, reassuring, full of news about Elena's progress. "She's doing wonderfully, Vincent. Top of her class in mathematics. Her violin teacher says she has real talent. She made the honor roll again. You've given her such opportunities." Vincent would smile, relieved, proud of a niece he'd never actually seen. He'd send birthday cards with generous checks. He'd tell himself he was doing the right thing, honoring Victoria's memory by ensuring her daughter had everything. He'd believed every word because believing was easier than being present, easier than disrupting his carefully constructed life, easier than facing his own inadequacy as a guardian. The pattern continued for 15 years without variation. Deposits made, calls received, updates delivered. A perfect arrangement built entirely on lies. Now Elena stood before him in a maid's uniform, trembling, and the truth was undeniable. "I never went to private school," she said quietly, her voice hollow. "I attended Hartford Public until I was 16. No violin lessons. No soccer team. Just survival." "Where were you living?" Vincent asked, though he dreaded the answer. "A apartment in Hartford. Tiny. Aunt Patricia would visit once a month, drop off some groceries, then leave. When I turned 16, she stopped coming. Said I was an adult now, that I needed to figure things out myself. I couldn't afford the rent alone, so I moved to boarding houses. Took whatever jobs I could find, dishwashing, cleaning, anything." "Mrs. Morrison hired you last month?" Elena nodded. "I had no idea whose house this was. She never told me your name, just said Mr. Carrington. I didn't know. I didn't know you existed." "Not really." The words shattered something fundamental in Vincent's chest. 15 years of $50,000 deposits. $750,000. And his niece had been living in poverty, abandoned at 16, working menial jobs just to survive. Patricia hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen Elena's entire childhood while Vincent funded the theft, one monthly payment at a time. The call to Benjamin Cross lasted less than 2 minutes. "Patricia Hartwell," Vincent said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Every account, every transaction for the last 15 years. I want to know where every single dollar went. Hire the best forensic accountant in Boston. I don't care what it costs." "Vincent, what's going on?" "Just do it, Ben. Fast. 3 weeks. That's how long the investigation took. 3 weeks during which Vincent could barely sleep, could barely function through board meetings and conference calls. He'd mechanically sign documents his assistant placed in front of him, his mind constantly circling back to Elena. She'd stayed in the mansion, not in the servants' quarters, but in one of the guest suites Vincent had hastily prepared. Mrs. Morrison fussed over her, bringing meals Elena barely touched. But Elena avoided Vincent entirely, slipping through hallways like a ghost, disappearing into her room whenever she heard his footsteps. He'd tried. He'd knocked on her door with offerings, new clothes, books, an invitation to dinner. Each time, her responses were polite but distant. "Thank you, but I'm fine. I'm not hungry. I'm tired." She didn't trust him. Why would she? He was a stranger claiming to be family, a billionaire who'd let her live in poverty for 15 years. The manila envelope arrived on a Thursday morning. Vincent's hands shook as he broke the seal, the Rodriguez's forensic analysis spilling across his desk in damning detail. The numbers told a story more horrific than Vincent had imagined. Patricia had never enrolled Elena in private school. Instead, she'd manufactured fake tuition invoices, $25,000 annually for a prestigious Connecticut academy that existed only on forged letterhead. Elena had attended Hartford Public, one of the state's most underfunded schools, while Patricia pocketed the difference. The violin lessons, soccer teams, tutors Vincent had paid for? None of it existed. Meanwhile, Patricia's own 2 sons had attended Choate Rosemary Hall and Phillips Exeter. Both had graduated from Ivy League universities, one from Yale, one from Harvard. Their education, the audit revealed, had been funded entirely by Elena's stolen money. At 16, Patricia had forged documents claiming Elena had received her full educational benefits and was now independent. Within weeks, she'd purchased a $2.3 million waterfront home in Naples, Florida. The down payment? Elena's education fund. The birthday cards Vincent had sent over 15 years, each containing checks made out to Elena, had never reached his niece. Patricia had opened every envelope, forged Elena's signature, and deposited the checks into her own accounts. Total theft, $923,000, including investment returns that should have grown the fund substantially. But the cruelest revelations came in the appendix. They had obtained Elena's academic records. Despite attending an under-resourced school, Elena had scored in the 95th percentile on standardized tests. Her teachers described her as exceptionally bright and remarkably self-motivated. The school librarian had written a note. "Elena Rodriguez spent every afternoon in our library, teaching herself advanced mathematics from outdated textbooks. I've never seen a student so hungry for learning with so few resources." She'd been accepted to the University of Connecticut with partial academic scholarships. The acceptance letter, included in the audit, praised her extraordinary achievement in the face of significant obstacles. She couldn't afford the remaining costs. No one had told her about the education fund that should have covered everything, the fund that had existed specifically for this purpose. Patricia hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen Elena's entire future. Vincent read the report 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of calculated cruelty. Patricia had systematically erased every opportunity Vincent had tried to provide. She'd isolated Elena, lied to her, abandoned her, all while living in luxury funded by the very money meant to save his niece from poverty. And Vincent had enabled it. Every monthly deposit, every trusting phone call, every year he'd chosen not to visit, not to verify, not to show up. He'd been complicit in destroying Elena's childhood. The rage came first, white-hot fury at Patricia's calculated betrayal. But beneath it was something darker, more devastating, the crushing weight of his own guilt. Patricia had stolen $900,000, but Vincent had given her 15 years to do it. He stood, the report still clutched in his shaking hands, and walked toward Elena's room. She deserved to know the truth, all of it, even the parts that damned him as thoroughly as they damned Patricia. Especially those parts. Vincent found Elena in the servants' quarters, not the guest suite he'd prepared, but the small room where she'd first been assigned as a maid. The contrast was jarring. Outside this door lay marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Inside was a narrow bed, a scarred dresser, and a single window overlooking the service alley. Elena was packing. Her belongings fit into a single worn duffel bag. 3 uniforms, some second-hand clothes, a battered paperback, toiletries in a plastic grocery bag. 15 years of life, reduced to what could be carried in one trip. "You don't have to leave," Vincent said from the doorway. Elena didn't turn around. Her hands continued folding a gray uniform with mechanical precision. "I can't stay here. Not like this. Not knowing." Her voice trailed off. "Then don't stay as an employee." Vincent stepped into the cramped room, the forensic report still gripped in his hand. "Stay as my niece. Stay as family." Elena's laugh was bitter, broken. "Family." She finally turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You didn't even recognize me. I served you coffee for 3 weeks, and you never knew who I was." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Vincent's chest tightened, but he didn't look away. "You're right. I failed you. Failed me." Elena's voice rose. "You abandoned me. You trusted a woman who—" She choked on the words. "I should have visited," Vincent said quietly. "I should have checked. I should have been present in your life instead of just sending money." He moved closer, needing her to hear this, to understand the depths of his culpability. "I prioritized my guilt and discomfort over your well-being. I sent money because it was easier than being present. I trusted Patricia because it meant I didn't have to change my life, didn't have to face my own inadequacy." Elena stared at him, her thin frame trembling. "But I'm here now, Elena." His voice cracked. "I'm asking, begging, for a chance to make this right." "How?" The word exploded from her like a wound rupturing. "How do you make this right? I lost 15 years. I lost my education." Her voice broke completely. "I lost knowing I had someone who cared about me. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you know what it's like to believe you're so worthless that even your own family wants nothing to do with you?" Vincent felt tears burning his eyes. "No," he admitted. "I don't know. But I want to understand." "Why?" "So you can feel better about yourself." "No." He held up the forensic report. "Patricia stole nearly $1 million from you. Money I sent for your education, your future. She forged your signature on birthday checks I sent every year. Checks you never received. She told me you were thriving while you were living in poverty." He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And I believed her because I never bothered to verify. I never showed up." Elena's face crumpled. She sank onto the edge of the narrow bed, her hands covering her face. Vincent knelt in front of her, careful not to touch, giving her space. "I want to help you get back everything that was stolen from you. Not just the money, everything. The education, the opportunities, the childhood you deserved." He waited until she looked at him. I know I don't deserve your trust. I know sorry isn't enough. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be the uncle you deserved from the beginning. Elena's hands slowly lowered. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. You can't give me back those 15 years. I know. I don't know you. You're a stranger. I know that too. The silence stretched between them, heavy with pain and possibility. Elena looked at the duffel bag, then at Vincent, then at the forensic report in his hands. What happens now? She asked finally. That's up to you, Vincent said. But if you stay as family. Not as an employee, not as charity. As my niece. As Victoria's daughter. As someone who belongs here. Elena didn't respond. She simply sat there, exhausted and uncertain. Then slowly, she reached into the duffel bag and began unpacking. One item at a time. The uniforms went back in the dresser. The paperback onto the nightstand. Vincent stood, watching from the doorway. She hadn't forgiven him. He didn't expect her to. But she hadn't left. It was a beginning. Fragile, tentative, built on ruins. But a beginning nonetheless. 3 days after the forensic audit, 2 FBI agents and 3 local police officers arrived at Patricia Hartwell's waterfront mansion in Naples, Florida. The house sat on a pristine stretch of beach, all white stucco and floor-to-ceiling windows, worth every penny of the $2.3 million Elena's education fund had purchased. Patricia answered the door in designer yoga clothes, a cappuccino in one hand, her face carefully made up for a lunch date she'd never make. She blinked at the badges, confused but not yet alarmed. Patricia Hartwell? The lead agent said. Yes. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and child neglect. The agent's voice was flat, professional. You have the right to remain silent. This is ridiculous, Patricia interrupted, her voice sharp with indignation. I raised that girl. Gave her a home. Fed her. I did everything. Ma'am, you need to stop talking and listen to your rights. The cappuccino slipped from Patricia's hand, shattering across marble tile as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Inside the mansion, investigators fanned out with a search warrant. In a climate-controlled storage room off the master bedroom, the kind wealthy people use for fur coats and fine wine, they found something else entirely. Boxes. Dozens of them, all labeled by year. Inside were birthday cards. Hundreds of them, pristine and unopened. 15 years of cards, each envelope addressed in Vincent Carrington's distinctive handwriting. Each one containing a check made out to my dear niece, Elena Rodriguez. Patricia had kept them like trophies, organized them by year, preserved them in perfect condition while Elena believed she'd been forgotten. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. In the interrogation room 6 hours later, Patricia sat across from Detective Maria Santos, her designer clothes wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking. But what emerged wasn't remorse. Victoria always got everything, Patricia spat, her voice venomous. The pretty sister, the successful brother, everyone's favorite. Do you know what that's like? Being on the outside, watching them all love each other while treating you like you don't matter. Detective Santos's expression remained neutral. So you stole nearly $1 million from an orphaned child. Why should her daughter get a fortune? Patricia's hands clenched on the metal table. Victoria was dead. She didn't need it. My boys worked hard. They deserved those opportunities. They deserved elite schools and Ivy League educations. They deserved the life Vincent's money could provide. So you forged a child's signature. Left her in poverty. Abandoned her at 16. I gave her a roof over her head for 13 years. Fed her. That's more than she deserved. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes cold. She killed Victoria. Did Vincent tell you that? Elena's birth killed her mother. Why should she profit from that? The detective's disgust was evident. For the record, Mrs. Hartwell just confessed to. I don't care, Patricia interrupted. I don't care what you think. My boys have Harvard and Yale degrees now. They have careers. Futures. That money did what it was supposed to. It built something meaningful. It was supposed to build Elena's future. Patricia smiled bitterly. She's nobody. She would have wasted it. The recording device captured every word. Back in Boston, Vincent's phone rang just after noon. He listened to Benjamin Cross relay the arrest details, the discovered evidence, Patricia's confession. When the attorney finished, Vincent stood motionless in his office for a long moment. Then he went to find Elena. She was in the mansion library, curled in a window seat with a book she wasn't reading. When she saw his face, she set it aside. "They arrested her," Vincent said quietly. "Patricia." "This morning." Elena nodded, her expression carefully blank. "They found something." Vincent's voice cracked. "Boxes of birthday cards. Every card I sent you over 15 years. She kept them all. Never let you see a single one." Elena's careful composure shattered. "She kept them. Every one. With the checks still inside." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo the FBI had sent. Boxes and boxes of unopened envelopes. Elena stared at the image, her breath coming in short gasps. "All this time I thought you didn't care. I thought." Vincent opened one of the few cards the FBI had photographed as evidence. His handwriting from 10 years ago. "To my dear niece Elena, happy 10th birthday. I hope this year brings you joy and wonder. Love always, Uncle Vincent." 15 years, he whispered. 15 years of trying to reach you, and she kept every single one. Elena's face crumpled completely. The grief that emerged wasn't just for stolen money or lost opportunities. It was for connection denied, for love intercepted, for a relationship stolen before it could exist. Vincent crossed the room and, for the first time, pulled his niece into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing for everything she'd never known existed. All the birthday wishes, all the checks meant to show he cared, all the evidence that she hadn't been forgotten after all. They stood there together, uncle and niece, mourning what had been stolen and beginning, finally, to grieve. In the weeks following Patricia's arrest, Vincent insisted Elena see Dr. Rachel Coleman, a trauma specialist who'd worked with abuse survivors for 20 years. Elena resisted at first, another stranger asking questions, probing wounds she'd learned to keep hidden. But Vincent was gentle, persistent. "Please," he said. "Not for me. For you." The truth emerged slowly, painfully, in Dr. Coleman's office overlooking Boston Harbor. "Your birth killed your mother." Elena's voice was flat, reciting words she'd heard thousands of times. "That's what Aunt Patricia always said. From the time I could understand language. You killed Victoria. You destroyed this family. Vincent blames you, but he sends money because he feels obligated. He wants nothing to do with you personally." Dr. Coleman's pen stilled on her notepad. "How old were you when she first told you this? 3? 4? I don't remember a time when I didn't know it was my fault." Vincent sat in Dr. Coleman's office 3 days later, listening to her explain what Elena had endured. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, so tightly his knuckles went white. "Patricia didn't just neglect Elena financially," Dr. Coleman said carefully. "She created a complete false reality. A psychological prison where Elena was systematically convinced she didn't deserve resources, love, or basic human dignity. I don't understand. The apartment Elena lived in, cramped, poorly maintained, inadequate, that wasn't just poverty. Patricia framed it as punishment. This is what you deserve for what you did. The second-hand clothes, the isolation, the minimal food, all of it was presented as more than Elena had earned." Dr. Coleman paused. Elena genuinely believed other children lived the same way. She had no frame of reference for normalcy. Vincent felt sick. "Tell me everything." The details were devastating. Elena had slept on a pull-out couch in a 500-square-foot apartment for 13 years. A couch Patricia never replaced as Elena grew, so by 16 she'd been sleeping with her legs cramped, her body contorted. She'd studied from textbooks Patricia bought at library sales, books from the 1990s with torn pages and outdated information. Food was whatever Patricia left behind from her own meals. Cold pasta, stale bread, bruised fruit from discount bins. The monthly grocery trips were exercises in control. "Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. Don't make me regret bringing you." Elena learned to make herself invisible, to need nothing, to apologize for existing. No friends. Patricia homeschooled her to prevent teachers from noticing the neglect. No birthday celebrations. No holidays. Just empty days bleeding into empty years. She didn't know other children celebrated birthdays? Vincent asked, his voice hollow. She thought birthdays were for children whose existence hadn't cost someone their life. The most devastating detail came last. When Patricia abandoned Elena on her 18th birthday, she'd left her with nothing. No birth certificate, no social security card, no identification documents of any kind. "You're an adult now," Dr. Coleman quoted from her notes. "Figure out your own life." Then she walked away. Elena spent weeks trying to get identification, but without documents, she couldn't prove who she was. She couldn't open a bank account, couldn't enroll in college, could barely find work. Vincent stared out the window, fighting nausea. "I gave Patricia nearly $1 million to care for Elena, and she used it to fund a 13-year campaign of psychological torture." The financial theft was only one layer, Dr. Coleman agreed. The psychological abuse went much deeper. That evening, Vincent found Elena in the library again. She looked up warily as he approached, still uncertain of his presence even weeks after Patricia's arrest. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said gently. "About your mother. About Victoria." Elena's expression shuddered. "I don't know anything about her." "What do you mean?" "I only know what she looked like from one photograph Patricia gave me. The day she left." Elena's voice was barely audible. "A woman with auburn hair. That's all." Vincent's heart shattered. He left the room, returning minutes later with a leather-bound photo album. He sat beside Elena, not too close, respecting her space, and opened it. "This is your mother," he said softly. The photos spanned years. Victoria at 20, laughing at a beach bonfire. Victoria in her 30s, cooking in a bright kitchen, flour on her nose. Victoria playing piano, her face lit with joy. Victoria pregnant, one hand on her swollen belly, her smile radiant with hope. Elena stared at the images as if they were artifacts from another world. "She was brilliant," Vincent said, his voice thick. "Kind, funny, passionate about helping others. She volunteered at women's shelters, taught piano to underprivileged kids. She made everyone around her feel valued." He pointed to a photo of Victoria doubled over with laughter. She had this ridiculous laugh, loud and completely unself-conscious. She didn't care what anyone thought. "She looks happy," Elena whispered. She was. "Especially when she found out she was pregnant with you." Vincent showed her the maternity photos. "She talked about you constantly. What she'd teach you, the life you'd have together. She loved you before you were even born." Elena's hand trembled as she traced her mother's face in the photograph. "Patricia said she'd still be alive if I hadn't been born." "Your mother would have been heartbroken to hear that lie," Vincent said firmly. "She would have loved you so much, Elena. She would have been so proud of you." Elena stared at the photos for hours that night, meeting her mother for the first time at 18, learning that she'd been wanted, loved, anticipated with joy. Not blamed. Not resented. Loved. 8 months after Patricia's arrest, the trial began at the federal courthouse in Boston. Media trucks lined the streets, cameras capturing everyone who entered. The headlines screamed variations of the same story. Wealthy woman accused of stealing niece's $900,000 education fund. Connecticut guardian charged with fraud, child neglect. Billionaire's niece found working as maid after years of stolen support. Vincent sat in the gallery, Elena beside him. It was her first time in a courtroom. She wore a navy dress he'd bought her hands folded tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. "You don't have to stay for all of it," Vincent whispered. "Yes, I do," Elena said quietly. Prosecutor Lisa Martinez was methodical, devastating. She built the case piece by piece, each exhibit more damning than the last. Bank records showing Patricia's $2.3 million Naples mansion purchase, funded entirely by Elena's education account. Credit card statements documenting luxury vacations, Paris, Dubai, the Maldives. Always first class. Always 5-star resorts. Country club membership dues. $100,000 annually. Designer clothes, jewelry, luxury cars, a BMW and a Mercedes SUV. All purchased with money meant for an orphaned child's education. Then came the contrast. Receipts from Elena's Hartford apartment. $800 monthly rent for a 500-square-foot unit in one of Connecticut's poorest neighborhoods. Grocery bills showing minimal purchases, bread, peanut butter, discount produce. Thrift store clothing receipts totaling less per year than Patricia spent on a single handbag. The defendant's biological sons attended Choate Rosemary Hall and Phillips Exeter Academy, Martinez continued, displaying tuition invoices. Both graduated from Ivy League universities, one from Yale, one from Harvard. Total cost of their education, $847,000. Funded entirely from Elena Rodriguez's trust. She showed the forged documents next. Falsified school records claiming Elena attended prestigious private academies. Fabricated receipts for violin lessons, tutoring, sports programs. All of it manufactured while Elena taught herself mathematics from outdated library books. Patricia's defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, tried to argue she'd provided adequate care. Miss Rodriguez was fed, housed, and homeschooled, he said smoothly. Her basic needs were met. My client made sacrifices to raise a child who wasn't her responsibility. Basic survival is not what $900,000 should provide. Martinez cut through, her voice sharp. The defendant wasn't paid to keep Elena Rodriguez alive. She was entrusted with funds to give her opportunities, education, a future. Instead, she systematically stole those opportunities while living in luxury. Expert witnesses testified about Elena's intellectual potential. A psychologist who'd evaluated her. Miss Rodriguez scored in the 95th percentile on standardized tests despite receiving minimal educational resources. Her aptitude is exceptional. Teachers from Hartford Public spoke next. Elena was the most motivated student I'd taught in 20 years, one said. Curious, hardworking, hungry for knowledge. With proper support, she could have achieved anything. The Yukon admissions officer took the stand. We offered Miss Rodriguez a partial scholarship based on her extraordinary academic performance. With the education fund Mr. Carrington had established, she would have thrived here. Instead, she couldn't afford the remaining costs. We never knew the funding existed. Then Patricia took the stand, her attorney's catastrophic mistake. Under cross-examination, her carefully maintained composure cracked. The resentment she'd harbored for decades spilled out, unfiltered and venomous. Victoria was always the favorite, Patricia spat. The pretty one, the beloved one. Everyone adored her. And Vincent, successful, brilliant Vincent, they all worshipped him. Her hands clenched on the witness stand. Do you know what it's like being invisible while your family shines? So you stole from an orphan child? Martinez asked coldly. Why should her daughter get everything when my boys worked hard? Patricia's voice rose. My sons earned their education. They deserved those opportunities. Elena, she stopped, seemed to reconsider, then pushed forward. I gave her a roof over her head. Fed her. She should be grateful. The courtroom reacted with audible disgust. Several jurors looked openly revolted. Then came Elena's testimony. She walked to the stand slowly, her 19-year-old frame still too thin, her hands trembling slightly. But when she spoke, her voice was clear. I believed I deserved nothing, Elena said quietly, because Aunt Patricia told me I'd cost everything. That my birth killed my mother. That my uncle blamed me, but sent money out of obligation. She looked directly at the jury. I didn't know other children celebrated birthdays or had friends. I thought isolation was normal for someone like me, someone whose existence had destroyed a family. Her voice grew stronger. I taught myself advanced mathematics from library books because I loved learning. But Aunt Patricia said education was wasted on me, that I should be grateful for the scraps I received. Elena paused, her eyes finding Vincent in the gallery. She didn't just steal money. She stole my childhood, my identity, my chance at a future. She convinced me I was worthless, undeserving, a burden. She turned back to the jury, her spine straightening. But I'm here now, and I'm reclaiming everything she tried to erase. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On the count of wire fraud, guilty. On the count of identity theft, guilty. On the count of forgery, guilty. On the count of child neglect, guilty. Patricia's face drained of all color. As each count was read, she seemed to shrink. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison, full restitution plus damages. Vincent watched Patricia being led away in handcuffs and felt nothing but hollow relief. Justice had been served. But it couldn't give Elena back the 15 years that had been stolen. 6 months after the trial, Elena stood in front of Boston University's School of Social Work, her acceptance letter folded carefully in her bag. She'd been admitted to their education policy and social work program. Full scholarship plus living expenses. Vincent had orchestrated it quietly, pulling strings while insisting to Elena it was purely merit-based. She knew better. But she'd learned to accept help, slowly, painfully learning that accepting wasn't the same as being a burden. The guest wing of Vincent's mansion had been transformed into Elena's apartment. Not a guest space, a home. Bright walls replaced dark paneling. New furniture Elena had chosen herself replaced the formal antiques. Bookshelves lined one wall, filling rapidly with texts she selected. Novels she'd always wanted to read, academic books on subjects that fascinated her, poetry collections Mrs. Morrison recommended. "This is your space," Vincent had said when the interior designer presented options. "Your home. Choose what makes you happy." Happy. Elena was still learning what that word meant. Her first semester was challenging, but exhilarating. She was older than most freshmen, 19 to their 18, and carried trauma most couldn't imagine. But she was also resilient, brilliant, hungry for the education she'd been denied. Her professors noticed immediately. "Miss Rodriguez asks the kind of questions that change how we think about policy," one told Vincent at a parent event Elena didn't know he'd attended. One evening in late October, Vincent found her in the mansion library, surrounded by textbooks. Constitutional law, child welfare policy, educational inequality. A laptop opened to a draft paper on guardianship oversight failures. He set a cup of tea beside her, Earl Grey, the way she liked it. They'd developed routines over the months. Quiet companionship. Slowly building trust through small, consistent gestures. "How are classes?" Vincent asked, settling into a nearby chair. Elena looked up, surprised. She still wasn't entirely comfortable with his interest, but she was learning. "Good. Challenging. I'm studying guardianship law right now. The systems that failed to protect me. That must be difficult." "It is." She paused, then continued, a sign of growing trust. "But I want to understand how it happened. How so many people missed what Patricia was doing. I want to help other kids who fall through the cracks." Vincent leaned forward. "I've been working on something related. I wanted to talk to you about it." He pulled out a folder. "I'm establishing a foundation. The Victoria Rodriguez Foundation. Named for your mother." Elena's hands stilled on her textbook. "It would focus on oversight for orphaned children in guardianship situations," Vincent continued. "Independent social workers doing regular check-ins, not just financial reviews, but actual visits. Educational advocates for homeschooled children. Systems to ensure guardians are using funds appropriately." He looked at her directly. "I want to make sure what happened to you never happens to another child." "You're doing this?" Elena's voice was quiet. "We're doing this. Together. If you want to be involved." Elena stared at the folder, then at Vincent. "I want to be involved." "You have insights no policy expert could match," Vincent said. "Your perspective, what you survived, what failed you, that's invaluable. If you're willing to share it." Over the following weeks, Elena began volunteering with the Foundation's development team. She shared her story anonymously, helping draft policies that addressed the exact failures that had allowed Patricia to abuse her for 15 years. Mandatory in-person visits. Financial audits with teeth. Educational assessments for homeschooled children. Hotlines for kids who needed help. They worked side by side, transforming her trauma into purpose. Wednesday dinners became sacred. Vincent, Elena, and Mrs. Morrison gathered in the smaller dining room. Not the formal space for business entertaining, but the family room with the worn table and comfortable chairs. Mrs. Morrison cooked Elena's requests, slowly teaching her recipes Victoria had loved. "Your mother made the best lasagna," the housekeeper said one evening, guiding Elena's hands as she layered pasta. "She'd want you to know how." Over dinner, Elena talked about her classes, her foundation work, her slowly forming dreams. "I'm thinking about law school eventually," she admitted one night. "Child welfare law. Advocacy. Whatever you want to do," Vincent said. "I'm here. Not just with money, with presence. I'll show up this time." Elena looked at him across the table, and something in her expression had softened. Not forgiveness, not entirely, not yet, but something close. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding. Tell me about Mom, she said suddenly. Not just the photos. What was she really like? Vincent smiled, his eyes distant with memory. Stubborn. God, she was stubborn. Once she decided something was right, nothing could change her mind. He laughed. And her laugh, loud, completely unself-conscious. She didn't care what anyone thought. She volunteered at women's shelters, taught piano to kids who couldn't afford lessons. She believed everyone deserved chances. Like you're giving me, Elena said quietly. Like you deserve, Vincent corrected. You're so much like her, Elena. Brilliant, determined, passionate about helping others. She'd be incredibly proud of you. Later that night, Elena stood in her apartment, looking at the photos now displayed on her wall. Victoria laughing. Elena as a baby. Vincent at various ages. The family she was reclaiming, piece by piece. It wasn't the family she should have had. The 15 stolen years couldn't be recovered. But it was family. Real, imperfect, present. And for the first time in her life, Elena believed she deserved it. 2 years after the trial, Elena stood at a podium before 200 donors, advocates, and policymakers, confident in a way that would have seemed impossible when Vincent first found her serving coffee in a maid's uniform. She was thriving at Boston University, junior year, 3.9 GPA, on track for law school. She'd become a voice in child advocacy circles, speaking at conferences about guardianship reform. The Victoria Rodriguez Foundation, in just its first year, had helped 47 children escape situations similar to hers. Elena's testimony before the Massachusetts state legislature had helped pass new protective laws requiring independent oversight of guardianship arrangements. Vincent sat in the audience at the foundation's first annual gala, watching his niece address the crowd with poise he'd helped nurture, but that had always been hers, inherited from Victoria, forged in survival. I was invisible for 15 years, Elena said, her voice steady and clear. Hidden in plain sight while systems that should have protected me failed completely. But I'm here now. And so are thousands of other children who need us to see them. She paused, letting the words settle. We can't give back stolen childhoods. We can't undo years of neglect or erase trauma. But we can prevent future childhoods from being stolen. We can create systems with teeth. We can ensure that vulnerable children have advocates who show up, not just with money, but with presence. The standing ovation was immediate. Vincent had tears in his eyes, watching this young woman, his niece, Victoria's daughter, transform her pain into purpose. After the gala, Elena found Vincent on the mansion terrace, loosening his tie, staring out at Boston Common bathed in moonlight. You did well tonight, he said as she approached. We did well, Elena corrected, settling beside him. They'd grown close over 2 years, though complicated feelings still surfaced. Grief for lost time, residual hurt, the slow work of building trust. I've been thinking about something, Elena said quietly. She pulled an old photograph from her clutch, the faded image Patricia had given her on her 18th birthday. Victoria, young and beautiful, frozen in time. I want to visit her grave. I've never been. Will you come with me? Vincent's throat tightened. Of course. The cemetery was quiet on Saturday morning, tucked in a peaceful Boston suburb. Vincent led Elena to a modest headstone beneath a maple tree. Victoria Rodriguez, beloved sister, devoted mother 1981 to 2022. Elena knelt, placing purple irises against the stone. Purple were her favorite, Vincent said softly. She always had them in the house. Elena traced her mother's name with trembling fingers. I'm okay now, Mom, she whispered. It took a long time, but I'm okay. I'm going to help other kids like me. Kids who are invisible. I'm going to make you proud. Vincent knelt beside his niece, his own words thick with emotion. I'm sorry, Victoria. I failed your daughter. I should have been there. I should have checked. But I'm trying to make it right. I'm trying to be the uncle she deserved from the beginning. The silence stretched, filled with years of grief and regret and tentative hope. Walking back to the car, Elena did something unexpected. She took Vincent's hand. A simple gesture, but the first time she'd initiated physical contact. Thank you for not giving up on me, she said. Vincent stopped walking, looking at her with eyes bright with unshed tears. I should have shown up sooner. I lost 15 years I can't get back. Elena stopped too, making him look at her directly. Mom used to say, "At least, that's what you told me," she said, "that family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up when it counts." She squeezed his hand. "You can't give me back those 15 years. And that will always hurt. There will always be moments when I wonder what my life could have been if you'd been there from the beginning." Vincent's heart broke a little more. "But you're here now," Elena continued, her voice softening. "And that matters. It matters more than you know." She paused, then added with a small smile, "I'm starting to forgive you. Eventually might be sooner than you think." That night, Vincent passed Elena's apartment on his way to bed. Her light was still on. It often was. Through the partially open door, he could see her surrounded by textbooks and case files, working on a brief for the foundation, her face intense with concentration. She looked up, caught him watching, and smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. Vincent smiled back and continued to his room. The stolen years would always be a scar. Some wounds never fully heal. There would always be graduations he'd missed, birthdays uncelebrated, childhood moments erased forever. But the years ahead were filled with everything Elena had been denied: opportunity, education, family, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was valued. Not for what she could provide, but simply because she existed and deserved to be loved. They were building the relationship they should have had from the beginning. Imperfect, complicated, marked by loss but sustained by presence. Transforming trauma into purpose. Loss into legacy. Pain into advocacy for children who needed someone to see them. One day at a time. One step closer to healing. One step closer to becoming the family Victoria had always wanted them to be. The end.
Thank you for watching till the end. If this story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Stories like this exist to remind us that healing is possible, that lost time doesn't have to mean a lost future, and that sometimes love finds us later, but still right on time. Take a moment to like this story, subscribe to the channel, Now's Haven, and share it with someone who needs hope today. And tell us in the comments, where in the world you're watching from and what would you have done differently if you were Vincent. When you're ready, the next story is waiting for you on your screen. Click it and keep watching, because somewhere in the next chapter, another life is about to change. See you there.